The Pentagon is GPU poor, and there's a GPU crisis. We don't have enough GPUs in the right places. And despite all the hype, if we don't course correct, we will spend billions of dollars and be in the same situation 2 to 3 years from now. Here's how we can fix it in 90 days. Welcome to the Model Citizen podcast. We spend a lot of time talking about the downstream impacts of artificial intelligence, especially in the military. And it's absolutely important to do so. I mean, I'm starting a company around exactly this. Focus on making sure that these powerful AI models work for and with government. When I was a technical lead for generative AI in the Pentagon, it was literally my life's work to figure out how to make this happen from the inside. And we're all betting big that AI and maybe soon artificial general intelligence will be so transformative for government work. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. If you think that's going to happen, making sure that we can all agree on how to use AI, making sure we have access to the same powerful models that you use when you do things like ChatGPT. But let's level set on something. You can't do AI without GPUs, full stop. Yeah, there are some other forms of compute that power AI, but the industry mostly is around GPUs. And it's why NVIDIA just hit a $4 trillion valuation with a T, 4 trillion. If you spend time in the circles that I do in DC, you're constantly at these AI national security conferences. These vendors have their advertisements plastered on the trains and the buses, ushering in AI to national security. It's pretty much what they all say. But then you go to build on top of these platforms in these cloud environments, and suddenly the smoke and mirrors just completely fall apart. They don't have GPUs. And I'm talking in some cases like 0 GPUs. In some cases, just a handful. And these aren't small companies. These aren't startups. These are the largest companies. I won't name them, but I have conversations with them all the time. Just spoke with one this past week. And they dominate the DoD space. The irony is, I think they actually spend more money on marketing their AI than they do on their GPUs, but I digress. And I even spent this past Christmas Eve last year on the phone with an executive at one of these companies talking about this very issue. So it's a very, pressing and near issue to me. For a while, I used to blame these companies. I'm like, why don't you just go buy GPUs, put them in your environments? It's really not that deep. Do the investment. But as I started talking to them, the finger came pointing right back to the Pentagon. We need to change how we approach this. I'm calling the Pentagon's lack of GPUs a crisis. And I'm deliberately calling it a crisis because unlike many other problems that the government faces, the government can't just buy ourselves out of this one. Money's involved, but even with another $1 billion, if we were to spend on some massive GPU cluster or order, we will still be standing here 2 years from now in the same exact situation. No GPUs in the environments that we all expect them to be in. The fix, or at least the way many executives at the companies and I see it, is nuanced. I'll tell you right now, it's not that we need to spend billions of dollars on compute or GPUs. One thing I've learned as an engineer in government in the Pentagon is technical policy must be surgical. It can't be overly prescriptive, but it can't be too abstract. And policy solutions and decisions need to be made by technical folks who physically have hands-on keyboard experience where they've run into the problem because they're the ones who are able to articulate it the best. So the fix here, to make GPUs federated throughout the Pentagon, throughout the military, itself is not actually very expensive. It doesn't require a bunch of financial capital, but it does require political capital and mission clarity. And that is something that I found is usually in rare supply. So today, I'm going to put on the hat of the Secretary or the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and I'm going to talk about, if I were in their position, how I'd fix the Pentagon's GPU crisis in the next 90 days. First, let's talk about defining what success would look like post-GPU crisis. All right. In the private sector, the term GPU poor is used, GPU poor, with the solution being to presumably become GPU rich. Just buy a bunch of GPUs. That'll solve all your problems. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think that's the wrong metric for success when it comes to national security. It's not simply a raw numbers game. And in fact, I think if we got the raw number of GPUs that the Pentagon has purchased over the years, it would probably be decent. It wouldn't be comparable to, what the AI labs are spending on, but it would be, nothing to laugh at. But the number of GPUs that you have is not as important compared to where those GPUs live, what they're connected to. Unlike the private sector, which largely operates like on the level playing field, which is the internet, everything kind of gets connected back to the internet. In the Pentagon and national security world, it operates a bunch of different networks and different environments that intentionally are disconnected from each other and the internet. So you have to think differently about this approach. I can't tell you how many times I would hear about these massive investments in compute or offerings from Department of Energy to leverage their compute. And it's like the worst feeling because it's definitely well-intentioned. And I know it helps the immediate team and researchers who buy it. But people assume that this compute can easily be shifted around. The problem is if it's not on our networks or it's not connected where the applications are hosted, we can't use them, full stop. There's no getting around it. We can't use it. And it doesn't matter. You could have the largest supercomputing cluster in the world. We still can't use it. I think our metrics for success should be focused on the developer's perspective. How many developers building for the Pentagon, across the military, or even across the government, how many of them have immediate access to the GPUs that they need? That should be what we kind of center our focus around. My solution to this crisis largely is clustered into two different approaches. One leverages the commercial world and the commercial internet, and the other deals with environments disconnected from the internet and how we actually coordinate the physical logistics of like moving these GPUs into these environments. So how do you fix the GPU crisis on the non-sensitive internet connected side of things? Get rid of GovCloud or any physically separate clouds for government. So what is GovCloud? 15 years ago, all these different tech companies and cloud providers, namely Amazon and Microsoft, they made a deal with the DoD. The DoD would do plenty of business with them, host all these different apps on their clouds if these companies created these like physically separate but equal versions of their cloud environments. The idea was trying to use Amazon and Microsoft Cloud, the thing actually that hosts this very podcast, for military government work would be too much of a cybersecurity threat. So it's kind of a compromise. It's like when your company gives you a separate work phone. It's largely done so they can lock that phone down and protect the company's information. You can almost think of the government as requiring these separate cloud environments that are physically separated to be locked down, mitigate risk. But over the years, as these cloud companies expanded and came out with all these different new features and services, trying to recreate the wheel and migrate those features to these like physically separate environments and these government clouds became more and more frustrating. And then this new AI wave hit. Even on the commercial side, the side that we all use on the internet, these cloud companies had a very hard time getting enough GPUs to keep up with demand over the past couple of years. So trying to beg and plead these cloud companies to move these like very precious GPUs over to their government environments is a really hard sell. I've spoken to executives of these companies. Imagine you're an executive at Amazon or Microsoft, and you're like, okay, I could either put this very expensive GPU physically on the commercial side, where it can power things like ChatGPT, make a bunch of money for us, or I could put that GPU in the government environment, where it may just sit there and not make any money. Google has really disrupted this space, surprisingly. They play the long game. Instead of creating a physically separate Google Cloud that would be really hard to maintain, they said, all right, let's do the hard work of getting the government to authorize just the regular Google Cloud environment that we all use, that all of our regular apps are hosted on. Going back to that work phone analogy, it's almost like if your job allowed you to securely access your work emails, but on your personal phone. It's just so much more convenient for everybody. So once Google Cloud got authorized by the Pentagon, by Department of Defense, all of a sudden, they're offering the US government, overnight, pretty much the largest number of GPUs by far. Hundreds of thousands or however many Google secretly has, I don't know. But the thing is, their regular cloud, their commercial cloud, is their government cloud. It's the same thing. Amazon and Microsoft have hundreds of thousands of the most powerful GPUs. That's without a doubt. And the Pentagon should be able to use those for non-sensitive work. not trying to recreate the wheel where we don't have to. If they use Google Cloud as a blueprint, their path to authorizing their commercial cloud, they could do the same thing. They need to do some administrative and technical work. They have to prove that they're using a secure supply chain, data centers, and engineers who are not from adversarial countries. And I'm not saying that that would happen overnight. And I don't think even the Pentagon could authorize that within 90 days. But I think with enough political pressure, leadership, I think you could get really close. Look, I'm not saying that government cloud can be killed overnight. Government cloud has been used for 10, 15 years. So obviously the migration will take years to do. But I could totally see the Pentagon authorizing this commercial side for non-sensitive use, especially if they have that kind of top-down political pressure. And this would actually solve pretty much like at least 90% of the compute issues on the non-sensitive side. So, I mean, it could do a lot of good. Now, let's talk about environments that are completely different from the internet. Here, we don't have any ability to connect to the internet, so we can't go and use that commercially available compute. All those like massive super clusters and what the AI labs are buying, we can't touch any of that because we'd have to connect to it to the internet. So this is a little bit more tricky though, because now like we, the government, have to figure out how to invest in GPUs instead of just relying on the private sector to go efficiently allocate things and do all sorts of craziness. So we have to be a little bit more resourceful. GPUs primarily live in two places in these types of environments. We're talking high performance computing centers or HPCs and the cloud. Again, environments not connected to the internet. High performance computing centers are essentially a bunch of GPUs put together in a room. I mean, your local university certainly has one. It's very common. They're usually used for research, not just for AI. They're used for things like physics simulations and medical research. And the Pentagon has an HPC as well. It's actually had one since 1992, before I was born. So it's been around for a while. But using them for AI is hard. So here's how we can make it better. Connect the Pentagon's HPC GPUs to wherever developers are building applications, which is usually the cloud. So if I'm a startup and I'm building a whole new AI application and hosting it on Amazon Web Services, and they don't have GPUs, well, then I should just be able to automatically tap into the Pentagon's GPUs. We've already paid for them. They're just sitting there, sometimes with no users. We might as well put them to work. Now, what about the cloud companies themselves? Amazon, Google, Microsoft. Remember, we're still talking about environments that are disconnected from the internet, so we can't use their massive GPU clusters. So here's my fix. The Pentagon can do some sort of like pre-commitment deal. We spend $30 million on each one of these cloud providers over the next 2 years. And the contract says something like, hey, cloud companies, here's $30 million. Go buy all the GPUs you need, but you need to keep them there for 2 years. Because, even if GPUs went online today, it's not like you'd immediately have people using it. This is a multi-year process. But this way, the cloud companies are actually going to be willing to take the risk to invest in their own compute and GPUs in places where the internet can't reach. And that's pretty much it. Those are the big rocks. These efforts aren't super complicated, but they are precise. And to get these done in, 90 days or mostly done in 90 days, they're going to require constant pressure, not tasking downs with, hey, update us in 90 days. You need the top level people, top brass in the Pentagon, keeping an eye on this. I'm super bullish on bringing AI to government, to the US military, but nothing is going to get us out of this GPU poor status. It's not going to be agents. It's not going to be AGI. We have to take these specific actions. We have to leverage commercial GPUs, use GPUs the Pentagon already has, and incentivize tech companies to invest in their own GPU count. Look, I have a million more downstream recommendations to the Pentagon when it comes to AI, and I talk to them a lot about this, how we evaluate it, how we work with the AI labs, but none of this matters if we don't have GPUs. My background was in startups. I built and sold a tech company, so I always have a soft spot for folks who are trying to build, disrupt. If we don't provide startups with the opportunity to leverage AI and all these different capabilities, we're really doing ourselves a disservice. So what do you think? Do you agree with the premise of this episode? Is the Pentagon actually GPU rich? I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this episode to be informative and want more of it, please give it a follow wherever you're listening to it. Next week, we're going to be talking to Jennifer Hay, who is the former director of the Defense Digital Service. And we're going to be talking about what DOGE can learn from the Pentagon SWAT team of nerds, the Defense Digital Service. Stay tuned. I'm Glenn, and this is Model Citizen. Have a great week.